Let's see, live on Facebook. Okay, so as we go through here, we need to type a few things. Right, Aric Woodward. Cool. Aric sold for 7 summers out of ASU and is a wonderful father of 4. His wife would have loved to join us on this Mother's Day, but she chose to be a mother instead. Check out We Support You, Jen. Check out some great stories from this former sales manager. Okay, share on page. All right. So as we go live here, we'll just typically how we start is just talk about how you got into Bucks and then the progression therein and kind of the ups and downs of all your stories. And then
see where it goes.
Yeah. And at some point we can talk about, post Southwestern life, because a lot of people have great insights to share from there. So we're already live here. Let's see if this is working. Audio. Is this, are the speakers turned on perhaps? We're just checking to see if the audio is working. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, they should be turned on.
Okay. All right. We just want to make sure that the audio is working successfully. I'm not sure how to work your setup too well. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And this is okay, right? People
Let's see, test speaker and mic.
Cool.
It's saying it's connected. Do it, unmute. Here we go.
Can you hear us? Let's see. Actually, you know what I'll do is I'll hop onto the phone here on Facebook and make sure it's working here. Thank you for your patience if you can hear us. If not, hi. This is fun. Yeah, we're going. Cool. So thanks for working with us to get this whole setup going.
Yeah.
Welcome, Aric, to Ponytails Podcast. We're on like episode 34 right now, 35, I can't remember. I'm your co-host, Nick Taverdi. Andres is hanging out with family and friends right now. So I'm local to where this guy lives. And so we decided to link up on this Mother's Day episode, right? Happy Mother's Day to everyone listening. Make sure you call your mom. I'll be calling Shirley later today. And again, Jen, his wife of, they both have 4 kids. We asked if she could grace us with her motherly presence, but she's a busy mom. So she's just off in the other room taking care of the kiddos. And we have plenty of moms that we've met that we can maybe share some stories about. And
I'm sure the kids will bang on the door.
So. Yeah, right. So we're excited to just dive into your story, Aric. Great. Thanks for being here. And
thanks for coming.
Thank you. This is a great home here in Tempe. And let's just kind of hop into it here. For your experience, for those that don't know Aric, he sold out of ASU, Arizona State. Started in 2004, worked through 7 summers to 2010, and worked with the TD organization. What was your exact organization called?
It was essentially TD.
Essentially TD, but what was it called?
It was a combination of things. So,
okay.
I mean, we started, winning tradition. It went Real Deal.
Yeah.
And then it finished off with TD with the Matt Ross and Kevin Johnson organization.
That's fun, man. Yeah. Some real cool, legendary book folk right there. And Aric, I still don't know much about your story, and I'd love to kind of hear you tell your story of how you rose to district sales manager and everything. But let's start with the start.
Yeah.
So who was Aric Woodward as maybe a freshman, sophomore, okay, on campus, and who got you into this whole thing?
Yeah, so I was a freshman at the time at ASU, obviously. I was majoring in physics out of all majors.
Yeah.
And I got a call from Matt Helton.
Okay.
If you've heard of that name. And
a legend from Murray State, for those that don't know.
Matt is a legend. We still do a fantasy football league together. Nice. So a lot of folks from the old Real Deal. But Matt called me, went to the info session. It was actually ran by a guy named Andy Halpert, who lives up in North Scottsdale.
Cool.
He was a 5 summer book guy.
Yeah.
And it was funny. I'll say I was kind of sold from the beginning.
Yeah.
In some ways I was an easy recruit, but at the same time, I was also a difficult recruit.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is like my freshman year, I was the only child. I grew up in Indiana. My parents actually, end of my high school year, moved out to Arizona. So I actually finished out high school by myself at 18 in Indiana, living with family, a couple of friends.
Okay.
I ran track. So, it was just a more independent atmosphere being in the Midwest.
Right.
And so like when I came out to ASU, it wasn't really a culture shock. So this idea of going across the country, for me personally, that didn't really scare or bother me. I needed money.
Yeah.
And so if you could imagine, I signed my DA, or at that time it was the letter of credit.
Right.
My parents mailed the parent support letter within days.
Yeah.
I'm sure Matt Helton was thinking like they mailed that back quick. I only think he had to visit my mom.
Yeah.
What's wrong? They want to get him out of here.
Yeah. So, is this guy good to work with?
What? So and Matt asked me, he goes, what's your biggest motivator? And I said, money. I need money.
Another red flag, right?
So he even, team recruited me, asked if I knew anybody that could be pretty good, pretty decent. And I recommended Jen, who's now my wife.
Yeah.
So I was like, hey, I'll call her. She'll meet us in Nashville. And you got it. How often does that happen?
Right.
So
just doesn't, right?
She meets with someone from Taylor University, has one notebook meeting. He sends the sales talk, and then we both show up in Nashville. And she memorized her sales talk, showed up. And so we actually sold me and my wife together the first summer.
And you were dating at the time and everything, or just close friends?
Close friends.
There you go. There you go. It turned out well.
It turned out well. We were dating a little bit more towards third, fourth summer.
Cool. Cool.
But so I remember going through the training, going through the spring. I was excited because I wanted to make that money.
Right.
And we got to sales school. 5 days, obviously, in sales school, and then my first summer was in Wisconsin.
Ooh, the cheese state.
The cheese state.
Man, smell the dairy air.
Yeah. And another, I guess, red flag, but I lived in Platteville, Wisconsin.
Cool.
And it was me, another student manager at the time, and then a first year, I can't remember, but he was a walker.
Okay.
And both of my roommates, I'll say they seem to be struggling. So I remember getting to the week 2 Sunday meeting and sitting down with Matt Helton and saying, hey, I think these guys, we may need to move them elsewhere. I don't know if this is the right situation for them.
Yeah.
First year, second week, and I'm giving advice in the territory.
Yeah.
After coming off a 80 unit week. So
right.
They eventually actually moved to other spots in southern Wisconsin. So I actually lived by myself for most of my first summer.
Something you weren't stranger to based on your family leaving Indiana. That's crazy, man.
At the end of the summer, towards deliveries, I ended up moving in with Cheyenne Shakiba, who actually lives out in LA now. Was I think 8 summer book guy, maybe even 9 summers out of Vanderbilt University.
Okay.
And so worked down there in kind of that Lafayette, Iowa, Lafayette County.
Sure.
That was my first summer, and sold
just south of where you.
Yeah.
Wisconsin.
I sold 3,400 units, and
nice.
I was excited. I got the check.
You got money.
I got the money.
Yeah.
And it was a great summer. I mean, we had a lot of good people. My wife was top 100. We had several other top first years out of the SU group, and we were led at that time, first year wise. Caitlin Fogarty was a top 3-4 producer.
Heard that name as well. Yeah.
Her and Sheridan were kind of the top people that summer, and both of them ended up selling over 10,000 units. So
that's awesome. So
that's
a good org going there.
Yeah, and that's what drew me back, right?
Yeah.
Is, we were surrounded by really good people. To be honest, coming through like high school and running track, like I was used to kind of being the kind of the best, and
Right.
and you get a little bit of, I guess you'd say, humble pie when you're not the best. And
so you had some other first years that did better than you that summer in that org, or?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And
man, that's a good problem to have when 3,400 isn't the best, because that's kind of been the best over the last few years, and the entire company is about that much.
Yeah.
Believe it or not.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't, I was still at first year wise at the top, but we had managers sell a lot more.
Oh, of course. So areas for growth and everything.
And I remember we were meeting with the Virginia Tech organization that summer. So Dave Bond, there were a lot of other student managers.
David Bond was the name of my first summer roommate. That's funny.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
This David Bond was from Virginia Tech,
cool.
and I think he sold 8,000 units that summer.
Nice.
So
yeah.
that's kind of what drew me back. And my second summer was in Missouri, and that was I believe the summer Dustin at that time broke the record.
Oh really?
And
yeah, so 2004, right?
Yeah, and that was probably, to be honest, my most challenging summer. I sold about the same amount as my first summer. But
I
think we had Roger Smith was in charge of the real deal, and I think we had 70 student managers, and I finished, I want to say number 30 or 35. So
of the 70,
we had a really good group of people, and anytime you're associated with that, you're always learning a ton. You feel like, gosh, how can I get to the next level? And then the second summer is when the recruiting started, and as you start recruiting a couple people at a time, and it starts to grow.
So how many people did you bring out with your first team?
What was my first team? That's a good question. I'm like going back in the
let's get the archives, rip them open, right?
First, I think I recruited 6.
Wow.
And
good sized team.
None of them came back.
Yeah. Did all of them, some of them finish?
Yeah, so two finished. I think one sold 1,000 units. Sure. Other one was my roommate, and he actually was a top first year, sold 3,000.
Cool.
He didn't come back. A gentleman named Ryan Proposio, great guy out in LA.
Cool.
And he returned my third summer.
Oh, really?
So he skipped and then came back. I take that back, my fourth summer.
Your fourth, yeah.
So skipped that. So rolling off that second summer recruiting wise, it was like, I recruited people, but you don't have anyone come back. Don't stick around. It's like, oh gosh, is this recruiting thing? Is that, we've all been through it, right? Is it for me? Is it?
Yeah, maybe I'll just go sell and then, figure that out so I can recruit better, right?
I probably tried that with Matt and Roger and just didn't work.
Right. So like, how did you eventually go on to then build a sales organization that you were managing? Because that's no easy task, man.
Yeah, so it was interesting. I remember, so my third summer was one of my better in-school selling summers. We went to Alabama. I can't remember, but I want to say I sold 4,900 units. I did growth. So hit the growth award, especially after selling the same as second summers. It was a fun summer. That was actually our org leader was Shane Merrick.
Nice.
So it was a great, we had great people in that summer.
Cool.
In the group we met up with, a lot of legacy people that stayed around summer after summer.
Yeah.
I didn't recruit a lot that third summer. It was, probably 3 people. And I remember coming back to check out, like, hey, I won growth award. I wasn't completely sold on coming back on my fourth summer.
Okay.
It was almost like in my head.
It's a hard job, man. Like, why would you want to sacrifice another summer and face failure and rejection and all this stuff?
Well, and the recruiting thing now had been 9 people.
Oh, really?
With no returning people.
Again, yeah.
Not knowing that Ryan Proposio would come back the fourth summer. And Ryan was one of those guys who was very captivating. Great leader, we get after it. Just had an intensity about him that if people gravitated towards that, he's someone you'd want in the org.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So I remember coming back after that summer at checkout and telling, saying, Roger, I just don't know about that fourth summer. I didn't sign the agreement.
Yeah. letter of credit and all that.
And I won't forget Roger is like, well, let's talk about it. And Roger and I are good friends. We worked together after Southwestern for 10 and a half years of my career at Thomson Reuters, and he still works there.
Yeah.
So we're great friends. We talk all the time.
Very cool.
And he said, well, let's get some dinner. He's like, you want to do like Subway? And,
yeah. Okay, sure.
I go, how about Morton's?
Okay. So
and
going for the price tag there.
I still thought we were doing Subway, but he booked a dinner at Morton's.
Cool.
And I won't forget though, we were kind of going through my thought process of becoming a senior.
Yeah.
Why don't I just kind of enter the career field?
Yeah.
And he made a good point of.
What did you wind up getting your degree in? Was it physics?
No, it's finance.
Finance. Okay. So numbers,
So,
all the same, right?
And I don't know if I entirely used it, but I guess in tech sales, you use it in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
You got to put together proposals and numbers. So, but Roger made a really good point. He's like, first of all, your last summer, regardless, you can really kind of call it your money summer. You can bank it, come out of graduating, you can work 14 weeks. Worst case scenario is you just take a good check into your career field.
Yeah.
And knowing, you saw a family, you saw the kids, you just don't get $35,000, $40,000, $30,000 checks by selling 5,000-6,000 units. So he had a really good point. The second point is, and this is what I think really helped recruiting as I got to understand it. And I had a chance to follow some really good recruiters, Roger, Matt Ross, a lot of great people like in the industry, is it all boils down to like fear.
And helping people through that and like empowering them to not fold under the pressure.
Yeah. I mean, because if you think about like, it was really the fear of the recruiting. Like
for you,
I felt the selling piece, but when you die, especially in school, you're going from classes, you're doing some phone time, you're going to the meetings. It's not the same as full timing, but in a way it is, and you're juggling a lot at the same time.
Yeah, in some ways it's harder.
I think you can make that argument.
Right.
And to go 6 people, 3 people, not having one come back, there was fear there.
Of course.
So Roger said, well, if you don't conquer that fear now, like, won't you have that fear later, and B, wouldn't it make sense to learn those things before going into, and at that time, a typical finance career was financial advising, right?
Yep.
If you did an Edward Jones or Southwestern Investments, but eventually all these things involved working with people and building teams.
Yeah.
And he was right, and I remember we shook hands at dinner and I committed, and I was one that if I committed, like I wasn't
you followed through.
Followed through.
Absolutely.
So, and it was honestly, that was probably the best decision I had made at that point, because you asked about like the growth. That summer was the summer that, we had really good, people be recruited my senior year.
Yeah.
And they stayed around for a long time.
Cool.
And what's neat about it is it's a lot of the long lasting friend relationships between me and my wife that we still like stay in contact today.
That's awesome. So you had how many people brought to the book field, and how'd that turn out that senior year?
So that's 10. So
cool.
It's a Spencer Hayes Award.
Heck yeah, man.
I think it was like one right at the end that kind of kicked it over.
Yeah.
But gosh, so we went to Pennsylvania. So we had 10 go out, and some familiar names. Dan Messner. He was actually my best man at my wedding.
That's awesome.
And we still stay in contact today. He lives up in Seattle.
Cool.
A legend, Monique. She was #1 first year.
Sure.
And had a multiple.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I've heard that name. So you had a pretty good team just from that one stat. Keep going though.
Well, and it was fun too, because versus just cold recruiting. Although Dan, that's a funny story. We'll talk about stories.
Sure.
Monique and I met in finance class,
Cool.
and she knew Caitlin Fogarty. We were all in the same organization.
Yeah.
My wife and I are actually going to see her and her husband in a couple months
Cool.
in Michigan. So we still stay in
Nice.
contact, and we've even worked at the same companies, post college. So I guess my point to that is we were starting to work with like friends, and I don't want to say that family, but like it wasn't just blind recruiting.
Of course.
And so that was what was neat about that organization, was there was a little bit more connection to it.
Right.
And then
The glue was there.
the funny story about Dan is I actually cold called him on Easter.
Okay.
Easter Sunday.
Yeah,
which,
right.
talk about book
Oh,
mentality.
dude, just like on this sacred day, just go to work, right?
Looking back, I'm just like, oh no, I'm gonna have to explain St. Peter or something.
Right.
But it was like a cold calling on Easter, and not just like light cold calling, like a 4 or 5 hour block, right?
Mhm.
Oh, everyone's gonna have their phone. This is a great day to call.
Yeah.
So I called Dan, and if you know Dan, very sarcastic, very funny, and I went through the whole spiel, right? We'll save you a chair, and
Yeah.
and this was
Can I count on you to be there, right?
and so this was the end of the semester.
Of course.
So-
Okay. Yeah.
So there's 30 chairs in there. He shows up.
Was it just him, or was there other people
There
there?
was one other person.
Okay, gotcha. But
And
you saved him that seat.
well, the best part was he commented on it. It's like, oh, selected seating, eh? I'm just like, oh gosh, he totally called me out on it.
Right, right.
And we went through the halfway point, and then there was just me and him.
Yeah.
And ended up meeting his dad. Said sound great. His dad was a local business owner,
Cool.
and went out that summer to Pennsylvania. The neat thing about the Pennsylvania summer was the org next to us was actually led by Mike Ford.
Cool.
So I don't know if you know that
I do know that name. Yeah.
Another one in our fantasy football league.
Nice.
So,
Nice.
not in Nashville there, led by Roger.
Cool.
But that was a great, I mean, we had top first years, we had great managers. And so those Sunday meetings they were just a ton of fun. So it was one of those summers you were working hard, but you enjoyed the Sunday meetings, right? Because there was success on both sides. It wasn't, lopsided where first years were having more success than student managers or vice versa. And you had a lot of folks that were really pushing the envelope. And that's really kind of what I guess you'd say kind of rocket shipped kind of the recruiting, because now we actually have people coming back.
Yeah.
Do you want to do this again? You do? Great.
Yeah. Right.
This is-
Heck yeah. All right. We're building momentum. Yeah.
But I learned a lot, and I've seen several of the podcasts up to this point.
Sure.
And you hear similar thoughts, right? Like I worked with Roger, and I think what it really came down to is just painting proper expectations.
Of course.
Someone on their first year.
Arming with info is how
Exactly.
I've heard that described. Yeah.
You have people on their first year recruiting, and it's easy to like talk about Sizzler and
Yeah. This is
Mexico.
so great. Yeah. You're going to do awesome because you're sure. Oh, wow. The rain really did a number on your psyche here. I'm sorry I didn't prepare you for that. Right.
And Sizzler is awesome, right? But at the same
Yeah.
time, it's like that's not the summer. And what was also tough for me, as I mentioned, kind of growing up in Indiana, maybe part of that was like being an only child, but like you were I was kind of forced to just kind of figure it out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so your parents would be at work, you get on the school bus, go home. Like it was just kind of me. It wasn't like interacting. So like, it took me a while to understand kind of where people were coming from.
Of course.
As I got deeper into recruiting, you had bigger teams come out. One of the common things you'd hear out in the book field, like if someone was struggling, was I just don't basically like being alone.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was hard to kind of get my mind
You're like,
wrapped
what are
around.
you talking about? Like, I grew up lonely.
I grew up lonely. I had friends, but like
Right.
I liked it. I got used to just being alone.
Can figure out how to occupy yourself. Yeah.
And I did solo sports. I did track and cross country, things where you could just train alone, and you're on a team, but no one really, like, you just raced and then you got your popsicles and you went home. Like,
Right.
so that took a while to kind of get my mind wrapped around that and
Sure.
understand, like, gosh, where are people coming from? Like, what are the challenges that they're actually going to deal with? One of the ponytails I saw a while back, who I knew a little bit, we weren't in the same group, was Atchison.
Atchison. No,
Atchison.
yeah.
So-
Everyone calls him Atchison, but yeah, Matt's incredible. He and I went to the same school. So.
And I always really enjoyed his parts, back in the day on kind of the preparation.
Oh yeah.
And the combination of some of his thoughts, others, it gets you thinking like, gosh, wait a minute, I can be real, I can be myself.
Yep.
And then, if you're preparing folks and then you're yourself, I think that was probably the biggest thing. As you can probably tell, I'm not a just rah.
Sure.
And so, I think the first few summers, it was like, gosh, we saw Aric on campus. He seemed like he did well, seemed like a nice guy. And then you get to sales school and you're sprinting and we're all putting a dollar bill in the shower, and it's just
Yeah,
like, wait a
total
minute.
switch, yeah.
And then it's like, well, wait a minute, is that me?
Right.
And it really wasn't. And so I feel like those later summers, once you kind of dug into people's fears, once you kind of understood where they were coming from, what could be actually their challenges, and have real conversations with them.
Yeah.
And also like leveling with folks that like, I don't know if this is a fit for you. I think sometimes like,
Right.
it's recruiting.
Pulling the cord for people who can't do it for themselves. Yeah.
I mean, if you think about like recruiting, like you meet people in February, and sometimes we wanted to like, are you going to do this? And it was like, well, I don't know. Like,
Right.
and it's okay if you don't know. They may need more information. They may need to, talk about a few things. And I think once you get to the point of like, wait a minute, like it really is recruiting, and I have to understand where they're coming from, you start to keep more people like, we used to call it kind of hot, warm, cold in the hopper. But you're preparing them so that when they go out, that like, hey, I've done my best. It's not just like, how many people can we get to Nashville?
Yeah. So less on the quantity, more on the quality, making sure that you're making use of what's actually there instead of just kind of blanket throwing coal in the hopper, as you said.
Yeah, but I mean, if you think about like quality, I mean, you can do both, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's really hard.
Yeah. Right.
I'll be the first. I never did a wall greets team.
Sure.
Obviously
no 20-person team. Oh no.
But you could still have 13, 14, 15, 16 people and prepare them properly.
Yeah.
But again, I think that's what it came to. And then you're invested. You feel like, hey, I've prepared them properly.
You know who everyone is, and like, wait, who's Snake? Yeah,
Exactly.
that's a reference to Kate Wright's 20-person team. No,
Snake.
Spider was this guy. She tells a great story about that, but yeah, he was the 20th person. So yeah, she sold a few books, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, so, and then you're like you said, you're invested, but then I also think because you've had those real conversations, then you could have those real conversations on the book field.
Sure.
And
Absolutely.
I feel, and we all could relate to this if we've recruited, like my first couple summers, I remember it wasn't that people left, like they left. Like back then we get off work, we had like the cell phone minute plan, like the nine, like after 9 it was free.
Right.
Not to like date myself, but after 9 it was
2000s.
And I think before 9, but so you get your good news voicemail. So that was left by sales managers. You'd call into your little call box, and but then you'd find out like it wasn't that people left, they just like they left.
Yeah, AWOL, away without leaving. So they didn't announce anything.
Yeah, I mean, I remember someone in Alabama. They were, they were in like Oklahoma by the end of the day. I mean, so that's the part that like we didn't even have a chance to like
work through stuff. Yeah.
So like something got hard. And I think the reality is it was on the sales manager or the recruiter. Like something I didn't prepare them to either like deal with it during the day or wait for it to deal with it later in the day. Because if you think like, hey, if they could work through that or talk to me about it later in the day, come follow. We hear so many stories where that ended up working out, but instead they're in Oklahoma. And I think again, that was the challenge early on, and later on you started to have more of those conversations because the reality
is they come up. Yeah.
I mean, when I think about the big teams back in the day, I think of I'm trying to think of, you had Jack Clark, you had Matt, Monique recruited some big teams. I mean, but it wasn't like we think like, oh, everyone sold 4,000 units of those teams. And you usually have 1 or 2 that did super well.
And then the rest kind of followed suit.
And you had folks that were in the middle, and then folks that maybe start off slow, finish strong. But the point is, it's like a progression throughout the summer. Right. And I think from a recruiting standpoint, once you get to that understanding and that mode of trying to work all that together versus just I signed them up. Oh, they're expected to be in Nashville, like my wife.
Right.
They're just going to show up. Right. And they're just going to do well. That's
not everybody works that way.
It doesn't work that way. So I know there's a lot there that kind of unpacked and went through, but I feel like that was really the journey.
Sure.
And then 6th, 7th summer, we ended up recruiting up in Utah a little bit, out in Wheaton, southern Wisconsin, and then ASU.
Cool.
And so eventually grew, and And that was a lot of
spread
fun.
out there, that's for sure.
Yeah, it was a lot of flights, a lot
Yeah.
of rental cars.
Of course, so you know how to pack light and move fast and all that good stuff.
Stay in Motel 6.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I never lived that life. I didn't have a sales organization, but I've heard. So
And then the last few summers, so I worked with Roger through summer 4, and then the last few summers were with Matt Ross and KJ.
cool.
Mhm.
So throughout that whole journey, I mean, that was a lot of info.
Yeah.
And that's what we love, you know. I'm curious who's on right now. We've got Wyo Gombarda. Well, we've got nobody live watching us, but there's certainly some people listening to this recording. Hello, everyone.
It is Mother's Day.
It is Mother's Day. Again, make sure you call your mom, right? And if you can't, you know, all the love to you guys. There's lots of people out there who have different life circumstances, and I don't know. Let's take a minute to honor Mom's Day. I don't know. Are there any favorite moms that you met on the book field, or like, you know, I suppose appreciation that you have even before you and your wife had children that helped you guys, you know, grow this family and the beautiful kids that you have. So,
Gosh, I have to think through some of
oh, of course,
Yeah.
just total random, you know, think about
we
it.
may need to come back to that.
Sure.
What I will say though is I remember from, I know I said this earlier before we started the podcast here, like you remember obviously your summers first, second, and then kind of the end. I feel like the middle is just kind of a mesh of all. I do remember, you know, my last summer meeting just a real cool family. It was out in South Carolina, mom and dad. So I guess it's maybe a Mother's Day, Father's Day combo story. But I remember the dad, she was a nurse and he was actually an MD. But years prior, he got into a severe car accident and he lost like 20% of his like basically brain power.
Whoa. Yikes.
But he was known for being like the smartest guy in the area.
Yeah.
That 20% of his brain power like decreased was enough to graduate med school.
That's a smart dude right there.
And it was one of those like, yeah, you're out in the country road and you sit down and you don't even realize you're sitting down with basically two doctors or two people in the medical field. And you know, he's throwing the ball at the dog and the mom's sitting there obviously very into the kid's education, and he was just like, yeah, how much is it? And you just give him the number and he's like, yeah, sounds great. It was like, you know,
ideal customer, right?
Yeah, if you dealt with all of them like that, it was,
right.
Gosh, I could
sell that all day.
That time Dustin's record would have been nothing.
Exactly.
Sell them all day, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just when you meet families like that out in the book field, it just tells you like how amazing. Like that time, I didn't even really think about kids. I don't even know if my wife at that time even really like wanted kids. She was pretty fixated on like, gosh, what could the career look like?
Yeah.
And that kind of developed later on. But at the same time, like you said, being able to see that on the book field, I'm not gonna lie, like you get, you know, there's impressions made, you know, because you
see the good parents, you see the bad parents,
and you see the bad. Or and in some cases not even like bad, even though we would see those from time to time.
Struggling, perhaps.
Just struggling
their best.
Trying to, you know, dig out of, you know, whatever hole is kind of being dug into.
Absolutely.
And you just, gosh, how can I work through, and if I dig into those holes, how do I get out of them, or how do I avoid those holes? And if you see enough families, you know what it's like. You had a lot of summers.
Oh yeah.
You start to, you know, piece those together.
Yeah, I mean, for me, just to kind of share about some families, you know, I always loved asking parents, like, how do I be a good dad someday? And, you know, I can talk about some of the, you know, dads that I learned from, not by name, because they're all a wash, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, my very first customer was a single mother, Robin Conkey. And I remember just sitting down with her and her kids. This was my first summer. I didn't have a, you know, bust out the gate start to my summer by any means. And, you know, she was a weak customer, and she's like giving me the sob story of how her husband literally left their family months before I met them in Massachusetts there. He just went all the way to California and just left them high and dry. And there was like 4 kids, and just hearing her grief, but also knowing that she cared enough to, you know, sign up for an order and, Yeah, like just hearing the struggles that people have, even though they might be a bad parent, quote unquote. You're right. They've got all these holes that people just leave them in. They get themselves into because, we're all broken people.
Yeah.
We're all trying our best. And I'll never forget her. I'll never forget, some of these other moms, like one that's coming to mind is another single mom in Vermont. And she was just like teaching me about certain things of energies and how in the mountains there it's like feminine mountains, and then the Rocky Mountains are like
Get your
masculine
aura
mountains.
reading and
Something like that. It wasn't anything too crazy, but she was like really, really intentional and very, very focused on, making sound decisions. Like, moms are very prudent in the way that they have to go about caring, not just for themselves, but their entire family. Right. Yeah. And I always think of when one day on the book field, my fourth summer, I followed a manager that was, same first summer as mine. Her name's Aisha. Her and her husband are actually leading the force right now back in Nebraska. And Aisha is soon to be a mom herself. She's due any day now. I don't know when her due date is, but it's very soon.
Congrats to her.
Yeah, congrats Aisha and Danny, and thanks for rebuilding Nebraska without me. It was so powerful to hear Aisha just fall in love with moms on the book field.
Yeah,
because she'd always be like, man, I just love my job because I just get to spend time with moms and I get to see how they live their life and how I can be a mom one day. And she's almost there. And I don't know, I like seeing her love of moms is something that like really rubbed off on me. And today isn't lost on me. Hello, Mom, if you're listening. I know you don't really listen to this podcast, that's fine. But I don't know, just the amount of consideration they have to take. I mean, there's really no choice for them if they're in that situation. Obviously, there are some moms who do choose away from caring about their families, and it's just it's a lot of struggles. And ultimately, that's what you and I got to be blessed with in your own life, and Aisha and all these wonderful mothers or mothers to be. And here's to moms, you're the reason why we were all here, because you care about education more than the dads. We talk to you first and foremost about, helping your families out. And so, props to the moms out there. So, so that's we had to make sure we honor moms on this day. But any other lingering thoughts on either that topic or anything else springing up for you, Aric?
I mean, as you were mentioning moms, I was also just thinking about approaching moms, jumping into the van. Probably should have been a little more cognizant.
Hey, I'm a stranger. How are the kids? Let me show you this book, right?
I will say that does remind me of the first door. Now that I think about, like, now these are coming back, right?
Oh yeah,
this is how
when you work through it. Yep.
The first door I knocked on, and it was in Rui, Wisconsin. It was, Matt Helton pointed at the map, start here.
Yeah.
Right. And I was out in the country, and there was a house swing set. And I remember pulling into the driveway, right? Approaching, hey, you must be the mom. And she just jumped in her car and drove off. It was 7:45 in the morning. Yeah. And I remember just holding my bag like, wait a minute, that wasn't how it's supposed to.
They're supposed to like me, right?
Obviously, she was taking her kids to school, but it wasn't even like, hey, gotta go. Like, I remember she just hopped in and she just drove off. And I was like, wait a minute, that is not how it's supposed to go. So ended up driving into, I remember that little town of Rui. And to get pre-approach, I went to the gas station, and the lady drew me out a map of where everyone lived in the whole town, and started working there. And like a traditional first year out in the country, like I decided that day Rui wasn't really the place to be.
Right.
So then I actually,
and you knew everything about turf as a first year, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I even educated my sales manager, right?
Exactly. This is where I should be working, right?
So I remember driving north, and I actually just looked it up on a map last night just to kind of get my thoughts back. Yeah. And my first customer was in Livingston, Wisconsin.
Okay.
But the funny thing was, it wasn't even in the county I was assigned. I went into my roommate's county and sold my first customer, not even even know when.
Take that, roommate.
But it was actually on Woodward Avenue.
No way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was my first customer, Kathy Rubish. I sold her one student handbook
Nice.
because they only needed
Just one.
algebra.
Oh, okay.
Right? So
yeah.
that was the only one that fit for him.
Right.
So,
That's awesome, man.
But I don't know, as you were talking about moms, just remind me of approaching and that approach, like, wait a minute, that's not how it's supposed to go. So.
Oh yeah. And I've had plenty of book nightmares and just like remembering all of the, unsavory moms and, the ones that are just like, I'd love to get this, but even my husband, it's just like, there's a lot to the experience of motherhood. And we kind of just interrupt it without announcing, right?
Yeah.
In selling books door to door. And, again, that's, again, why I love Aisha's perspective is just how much we get to learn about that and then honor it through being service minded and, still taking their rejection and either moving on or working through that in a way that's like pleasantly persistent and everything. And I mean, there's just, I threw out all my old names lists, but I remember looking through them, just be like, yeah, I remember these people. And every so often we have our Facebook business pages in the business these days. And it's so great to just go back through, and it's always pictures with the moms, if anyone, sometimes with the dads. Sometimes the mom really doesn't want to be in the picture, but it's really cool to see like, oh yeah, I remember, I approached them at this time of day and they were doing this thing, and yeah, they like were cool, and they were like, yeah, let's sit down, and I know these people, and yeah, it's just it's cool to reminisce and go back through it,
Yeah, and I think there is a preparation as we get older. I'm 36 now.
Sure.
So I mean, far removed from the book field, obviously. 18 years, right? So, as a parent, I do think the things that you deal with on the book field and the things that you go through, it's not exactly the same, but with kids, like you learn to be patient with them, you learn to be present with them. Everything. Is such a big deal to them. And you start to see things from their perspective, and whether it's the selling or, as we were talking about, the recruiting earlier, I think a lot of that does correlate. I'm sure I'm not the first one to mention it, but if you do enough of these ponytails and podcasts, people talk about it, like it does influence your parenthood.
Sure.
Because you do also see other parents that they flip out on everything, and there is something to be said, like, I think the book field, whether it's selling or recruiting, does ground you a little bit.
Humbles you.
And it's the whole old expression, right? It's not as great as it could be, or as worse could be. You try to be somewhat smooth and steady.
Yep.
And
like a Cadillac or something. Real deal.
Did you hear that, Travis? Real deal.
I know that rivalry. So yeah.
I watched Travis Lopez's the other day. So
yeah.
Great job, Travis, by the way. The Cadillacs are great. We all worked together, obviously, at that time. From a parent's perspective, that's kind of what, again, we have 4 kids, so we do it that day in and day out. I'm trying to be present with the kids.
Yeah. So to kind of change gears here, this is great conversation. You wrapped up your last summer in 2010, right? 2010,
yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So let's talk about that transition out of Southwestern and into Thomson Reuters, right? Is what you went right into, and
I did, yeah.
Let's hear about it. How'd that transition go?
And it's interesting. Like, I know some people have different thoughts on this, and many times we hear like maybe I stayed like a summer too long.
Sure.
I don't think that was really the case for me.
That's good.
At that time the organization was growing. So financially, for being my age, it was pretty good money. But we were starting to hit a stage in our life. We were getting married. We did decide that we want to have kids in the future. And so remember I was talking about having the campuses in all these different places.
Yeah.
I felt kind of, spread too thin.
Yeah.
And it just became more of a, and it was nerve wracking too, because you're entering possibly something. Well, at that time, I didn't even know what I was doing. Right. So when you decide you're leaving and then you're going to go do something else, you don't usually know what you're going to be doing.
You're just like, I'm done. Wipe your hands and leave, right?
And it happened so fast.
Yeah.
I remember finishing my 7th summer. I was out in South Carolina, and we had we had a lot of people come out. It was average summer, but we had about 80 people in our organization, like when you included North Carolina, South Carolina. So, so there's a lot going on.
A lot of people
right?
on it each Sunday meeting, and first years to get PCs, all that.
I even got I have a cat from South Carolina that still lives with me.
No way.
Maybe we can
That's
bring
an old cat.
Maybe we can bring Max
Yeah.
down here. So, I text my wife, have bring Max.
Yeah, right.
You finish the summer and it's crazy, right? Because it happened so fast. Like I decided, hey, this is gonna be my last summer. And so you gotta, explain and kind of tell everybody. And then B, you have the awards banquet, and then it's kind of done.
Yeah.
And that was always the challenging thing. Like, I don't think there's not another way to do it. But when I look back to the book field, part of me is like, gosh, I wish I would have slowed down and enjoyed the
a little
moments,
bit more of it. Yeah.
Because you go to so many cool places. And a lot of the memories I remember were part of the book field, but part of the Sunday meetings and going and doing fun stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Or I can remember, just like many of us, right? You finish deliveries and then 45 minutes later, you're driving back to checkout. And it's like, wait a minute, could I have stopped and seen that cool monument?
Yeah. Actually went to not just the homes in your turf, but what it's known for,
Yeah. Because you are in all these neat places.
Absolutely.
One of my favorite Sunday meetings we had was in Wilmington, North Carolina, and we saw the Dark Knight.
Nice.
But and don't get me wrong, I think out of all the Sundays, I think that was the only time we saw a movie.
Yeah.
It's not the ideal Sunday meeting.
Right. Because how do you train and reel in the cats? Because it's like herding cats to manage people.
This air conditioning is nice, and this this is real comfortable. This could be comfortable on a Monday and a Tuesday.
Yeah.
So, but this was a those are the things I remember. So again, kind of getting back to exiting, it's gosh, this happened so fast, and then I was searching for a job. And then everything else is just going.
Yeah.
Right? Your organization is it's moving
people
on.
That you recruited and everything.
And so Monique and they're in great hands, right? Monique was working with them. Dan was working with them.
Cool.
Dan worked with Emily. Monique worked with Aric, which I know Aaron stayed, for a long time.
Erin Reynolds now Sakatanov. She is a sales manager for TD right now.
Still currently.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. So your legacy exists to this day. That's awesome, man.
So so now I've left, right? We got married, and I'd always stayed in contact with a few book people. Roger was my sales manager, and at the time, I'd called Roger, and it was interesting because we were going through we didn't really realize it as, I'll say, kids, but financial collapse was happening.
Yeah.
That was when housing crisis, obviously stock market, et cetera. And so Thomson Reuters at the time, they worked, there was a few different divisions, but there was a tax and accounting division, and there was a position in Arizona. And so I asked Roger a little bit about it. And at that time, I wanted to get into something that, I could just kind of learn my own deal. Because I also felt if I could learn how to sell it, I could lead people.
I gotta get one thing down, get your first summer in, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I went through the interview process. I remember driving the first interview. I remember talking to Dan McCarthy, who was my manager for a long time at Thomson Reuters. And we were just kind of working through kind of what to expect. And this is Travis, again, was on your show, explained kind of the corporate world really well. Right. So this is large, publicly traded company.
Yep.
You're going through an interview process. This isn't
someone and you're in.
This isn't Dan showing up after Easter.
Yeah.
In the room. And, any cut points. So and you never know how many people you're interviewing with or against, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So I went through the process and thankfully, got the position. And so at that time I was selling tax and accounting research software.
Software.
So if you've ever had an accountant or a CPA do your tax return, we basically sold the product where they could type their questions in. And so what's the mileage rate? I'm simplifying it. There's more complex stuff. Obviously, if you and I owned 100 rental properties, an apartment complex, and we had several employees, there's all kinds of tax ramifications that happen in those scenarios. So it was also accounting, audit, there were other areas. So I had a territory, it was half of Arizona. And when I look back on it, it was probably the perfect match, even though I didn't know it.
Sure.
I mean, to be honest, at that time, it was like, I get a salary? What?
No, I just give me commission.
What?
Yeah, I'm sure there were bonuses.
Where's the 100% commission plan?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So I was just excited just to kind of take that, that next step, but didn't really know what to expect. But looking back on it, a couple of things. One is it was a good fit because it was at that time, it was a very high activity position.
Yeah.
And then later in TR, I took more strategic positions where you had less accounts.
Gotcha.
And you spend the same amount of time. It's just with strategic accounts, you research more.
Yep.
There are more detailed presentations, kind of like recruiting.
Yeah. That's how solar is.
Yeah,
sure.
exactly.
Oh yeah.
Different, obviously, power grids, different companies.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, that role, that first role was a very high activity role. And so I was driving all over Arizona. But what was interesting is at the time, at least for kind of our team and maybe kind of the Southwest region, I was leading an activity. And you think back to the book field, like a good week in presentations could be 80, 90, 100 sit downs.
Yeah.
Well, and at Thomson Reuters, where I worked again with those accounting firms and corporations, if you
Probably a third of that, double or half.
I mean, after tax season, if you could do 50 in a week, 50 in a month,
Oh,
like
okay.
you were just like
Yeah.
off to the races.
Of course. Okay.
And so it was interesting because I didn't really know any better. I was just so used to this like high octane environment. And I was just like, go.
Yeah.
And I had a lot to learn, but it's the same. Well, here's what I will say is for those that, are going to eventually kind of go through that transition or there's so many roles out there and it's like the same stuff.
Yeah. Humans are humans.
Some stuff's transactional, some stuff's a little bit more strategic.
Yeah.
But it's pre-approach, it's asking the right questions, it's
finding a need.
It's going through your summary. I just actually I'm at a new company now, just left Thomson Reuters after 10 and a half years.
Yeah.
But I just got done writing like my closing steps. It's all like,
here's what everybody likes about the way we do business is I'm just taking your order today. You can cancel, but don't say that,
yeah, it's a version of
right,
just tailored to what you're doing and the product that you're servicing and talking about. So that's what's interesting. As I got further into the corporate space, now it's different. Like you can't say whatever you want.
Can't wing it.
you're at a publicly traded company. You can't wing it, but you can't be on a conference call and say something like you probably say at Sizzler, or like you have HR, you have like if you overstep the line, you get a written warning, you overstep it again, you're gone.
Right.
Like, so that's the part that sometimes folks have to, I guess, get used to.
Of course.
And
they just want to be themselves, and live loosely a little bit,
Yeah, and I was selling to CPAs and attorneys, and again, these were law firms, CPA firms, and corporations, so it was a whole mixture. I won't forget my first week, my sales manager called me and he's like, dude, we need to change your voicemail, because I just came onto this corporation and I think my voicemail was like, hey, this is Aric. Couldn't get to the phone,
something not professional,
right? It's like, we got to change that, and had to re-record it. And so, but again, great place. It was a great transition. I was there for 10 and a half years. And then
just throwing in a decade,
just a decade.
Casual. That's more time than your Southwestern career. So that's significant.
Yeah. And I will say too, half of it was selling, and then I eventually, basically got promoted into a leadership role.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit different in corporate America. Like, you have a 10-person team, and there's a leadership component to it. There's a training component, but there's also the corporate piece, right? The forecasting, what's the revenue going to be like? What are the deals?
Research,
there's a lot of deal inspection. So there's a lot of things that I really learned throughout that process. Unfortunately, they're, big company, you go through a lot of reorganization, and that's part of, being at a big company. So we went through a big reorganization. There just wasn't a role at the time, for me. And that happens. And the big companies, they take care of you. I think Travis mentioned on his ponytails, there's severances and things. So it's not like you're left like high and dry. They take care of you. And that's what led me from going from Thomson Reuters to Sprinkler.
So tell us about Sprinkler now. By the way, awesome Summarization, because my experience I haven't really been in corporate world, but post Southwestern, it is, got to be more professional and refined, and it's all the same, but it's all different at the same time, right? So
it's all the same, it's all different.
Yeah.
And I think and when you work with folks in the corporate environment, I mean, it is a different environment. I mean, you have folks in I heard this on a couple other ponytails where, I mean, they went to Ivy League schools. It's a different, there's a different environment. Right?
Yeah.
But then there's the other, most of the employees where they're like you and I. They went to I'll say just kind of normal. It wasn't Harvard law.
Sure.
Well, Creighton's a good school. Creighton is a good school. It used to be good basketball. I can't remember how they.
We made it to the Sweet 16 for the first time this last season and got blown up by Gonzaga, who eventually lost in the championship. I honestly wish they won, but good on. Was it who won this year? I didn't care too much about basketball this year. Gosh,
who did win? It was
it was like their first. Man, it's Baylor. It was Baylor, another private school. Yeah, good for sick 'em Bears, right? So yeah, you're dealing with people who are in the Harvard Law School and get into corporate world, but you're also dealing with more salt of the earth folk, right?
Yeah, so you have two different groups, right? They are at the kind of prestigious schools, East Coast, West Coast, have kind of went through, and by the way, that's a tough environment. They really prepare and train those people in that environment. And you have folks that kind of went to, I'll say, kind of ASUs, U of A's. They worked at like an ADP or a Paychex. They really kind of cut their teeth, and then they want to go into kind of the next thing. And really, the difference between a lot of the companies is just brand awareness.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the
100%.
I remember, not to get away from the sprinkler topic, I'll tie it together.
Sure.
But I remember, starting at Thompson, and the first cold call I did, I remember he said, "Yeah, sounds great. We'd love to talk to you. Come on in."
Versus, who are you? Right.
Now they weren't all like that, of course.
Yeah.
But
it was a sign of what was to come a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you have a couple of different companies out there, right? A Thompson, the brand's pretty well known. Whether it's tax, whether it's legal products, there's other products that they offer as well. And so when you're calling in these groups, they're at least aware of Thompson. It doesn't mean that they're always going to take an appointment with you. You need to be very specific, because a lot of folks in the corporate space also view like appointments as a waste of time, unless if it's meaningful to them. They're not just sitting down just to sit down.
Yeah.
A place like Sprinkler, in fact, the joke is like, how do you spell that? Because there's no E.
Yeah.
Sprinkler it's a growing private company. And so many of the people I talk to now, they feel like, hey, I think I might have heard of that.
And what are they into? Just to tell us who Sprinkler is. What's your new job?
Yeah, so I'm actually now serving, instead of the commercial space corporations, I'm in the government space.
Oh, okay.
Which is a new area that Sprinkler is growing.
Cool.
But leading up to them going into other areas, they've been in corporate. So
it's all tech sales still. Right?
Still tech sales. Cool. So Sprinkler, I guess to summarize it, they're the only company in the industry right now that services 4 different basically areas, and it's all tied to digital channels. So what Sprinkler does, let's say I'm just going to choose a large company, big company.
Let's go with Gallup.
Gallup. Okay.
You know Gallup?
I don't know if I know Gallup.
How about Mutual of Omaha?
Perfect.
These are corporations from my hometown.
Yeah. So Mutual of Omaha. Okay. So let's say they ended up buying Sprinkler. Okay.
Cool.
We'll simplify it.
Buying Sprinkler's products, not purchasing the company itself.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. Correct.
Mergers happen, right?
They do happen.
Yeah. Especially with Mutual of Omaha, they got the money. So
true. So you have someone like Sprinkler, let's say they buy what's called a listing product and engagement product. So they would basically use Sprinkler to gather what they call unstructured data. Okay. So this is all the public conversations that are happening out there. Mm-hmm. So their platform, they call it AI, but it's scraping and it's taking in all that information. So it could be from Google Messenger, Reddit, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. So
it's like super like broken up artifacts of the info that people are talking about, say Mutual of Omaha.
Uh-huh.
Okay. That's
so
interesting.
then they're taking all that data, and then Mutual of Omaha is deciding what they can actually do with that data. Okay. And so I'll make kind of a simple example, but maybe it's Mutual of Omaha's 4 different locations outside of Omaha, and one of the locations is really, really successful, more successful than the other 3. Why is that?
Right.
And it sounds crazy, but like it could be factors like parking space. It could be factors like maybe the restrooms suck at the one location.
Yeah.
Maybe there's construction going in. And so
Yeah.
there's all these real-time public conversations that are happening real time
Yeah.
that groups, corporations, I'm in the government space.
Right.
But how do you capture those conversations and make it better for, we'll say, the person, the customer, or the citizen? So how often have you ever responded on a website on a little chat bot?
Yeah, I mean, a
Sometimes.
few times. Yeah.
Or people will put things on Twitter.
Yeah.
So let's say, I don't know,
You want to harvest that. Okay.
I had to, gosh, I went to Mutual of Omaha at my hometown. I couldn't even get a parking spot. I had to park across the street next to something I didn't want to park next to, and you
Yeah.
tweet it. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Interesting.
something like that, if they set it up and they purchased a sprinkler, would go to their customer care group. So now the customer care group is working off of one platform, and that's what's unique to sprinkler is
Cool.
every product that they sell is coded for the same platform.
That's good.
And so whenever
Centralized.
there's like acquisition, as you were talking about, it's reprogrammed back into that platform.
Cool.
So you're always working off of one platform versus having several logins.
Right.
But then like in a scenario like I was just talking about, if you engaged on Twitter, then the customer care group could go, well, this is we really want to address that, blah, blah, blah. Well, they would put it in their program, but it would go back on Twitter to you. Versus how often have we submitted something and then you get an email and then they're saying call. And it's like, wait a minute, like I submitted it here, I'm getting an email back, and then now you want me to call you.
Yeah.
Like that's
so
not
if someone's going to tweet about it or talk on a chat bot, and the customer service team is getting aware of it, they want to respond on that Twitter, on that chat bot, to make sure that the way it's being received is the way it's being given, like the response.
Correct.
That's really cool.
So
Okay.
and so that's just like a piece of it.
Yeah.
Right. But with all this data, you can make determinations on like how do you make the customer experience better?
Of course.
So I'm in the government side, so it becomes like how do you make the citizen experience better?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Make them happy about the town they're living in. That's so cool.
So the city, the government, the town, the county.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I heard a story the other day, 2 stories within Sprinkler where one is a company was able to increase like profits because through all the analysis, they realized like their customers wanted breakfast in the morning. And so all they had to do is add breakfast items to the menu and their profits went through the roof.
That's cool.
But what was funny was they added healthy items the previous year.
Okay.
And no one cared.
Right.
I want an unhealthy breakfast, but I want to be able to purchase it in the morning, afternoon, and evening.
Okay.
And the profits
all day breakfast
went through the roof.
That's fun.
In the government space, it could be, I'm learning a lot about the government. So I've been there almost 2 months, so I'm still learning. But like take airports, for example, they're like small cities.
Yeah.
Right. So
they represent the city or metroplex that they're a part of.
So, and then you have restaurants in there, you have gates, you have digital billboards.
Nothing but customer experiences left and right. Yeah. Citizen. Yeah, absolutely. That's so interesting.
I think there was an airport not long ago where the little trolley mono rail track thing that takes you to your gate, whatever you call it.
Yeah, the thing.
Broke down.
Oh no.
And so then it was like you had all these people standing around. What do you do? Like, how do you convey to those people what to do next? So you have people on Twitter, you have people here, you have people there. So they're trying to find out what their options are. And if you don't have a clear path on how to deal with the customer experience, so what you were talking about earlier in replying to is like the citizen experience, but then you also have like the emergency management experience of like, what do you do
when the thing breaks down?
Correct.
The thing.
I think of even in Texas, a month or 2 ago.
The grid just
there's water issues. There's obviously you have no electric, like, so then how do you communicate? How do you address what's going on?
Provide options.
And by the way, these aren't like easy answers. And
Not at
so
all, no.
what's interesting is, again, working with Sprinkler up to this point is everything's customized. So it was different than like the first job I had at Thomson Reuters, where it was a little bit more
This
high
is how
activity.
you step in line, and this is the system you're stepping into in terms of customers plugging in versus this you're plugging into the customer.
Yeah, and you're trying to figure out like how can we help your organization, because it's not, it's a puzzle that you're putting together that requires multiple conversations just to figure out if this could work.
Right.
But the same, it's interesting though. Again, the same things come into play, right? You're always setting up the next steps. You're always asking deeper questions. You're always, going that second, third level. You're again, you're summarizing. You're doing like a lot of the same things that you would always be doing in selling. And so like everything, I don't know if people going into their first summer watch this, but like everything that you're doing, like, that you learn in the first, second, third summer, like it is transferable.
Oh, of course.
It's transferable in a lot of careers. Obviously sales, it's very transferable.
Yeah. And it's transferable into your relationships and everyday stuff that might not even have to do if your career isn't sales focused, right? It's absolutely, yeah.
And so now I'm 2 months in. I'm actually still going through training. It's a long sales school, but it should be.
I've heard sales school with my friend Sam Ash. She's like a logistics and trucking company. It's her sales school was 7 months. How long's yours?
Yeah, it's good. It's about that.
There you go.
Yeah. So it's a continual ramp where you build in your cold calling, you build in your systems and your procedures, but it takes a lot of time, and that's what was again nice on the book field is your product was very simple, so you could focus on the sales process. What becomes more challenging in like corporate environments is you have very complex products, so if you don't know the products, you forget about the sales piece of it as you're going through the demos, because you're thinking about what do I say here, what do I say there. So it just becomes a question of like, how can you do that naturally, but again, feel comfortable where I can also focus on the sales process.
Right.
Because on the book field, you're showing one of two products, maybe throwing in some CD-ROMs. So you're
back in the day.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's a log on to a website now.
CD-ROMs?
I mean, I sold those my first summer, and then we got rid of them my second.
So. Do they have Frippletown? Did it still have? No, not good. The SAT one was great though.
Yeah. So I think they still have. I think they've gone digital with the SAT and ACT prep, but yeah.
So, but you're right. It's a long training. It's good. Again, you take it day by day.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a really cool job, man.
Yeah.
I am like very interested in that. That's because data and like analytics and just understanding how customers like. You're like getting into the micro habits of how they interact with whatever they're interacting with. And that's something that is just a whole big beast of stuff to uncover.
Yeah. I mean, a common statement our CEO makes is you understand basically the human.
Yep. That's so cool.
Versus, and it's true, right? There's so much data that's actually happening real time.
Day by day, minute by minute.
And what is interesting, like, because I'm going through training, because again, I'm in this government sector.
Sure.
And there's, gosh, we probably have 12 people, excluding like the managers and directors that are across the United States, and then also federal accounts in DC. So those would be things like Weather Channel, Marines, Army, like federal accounts that White House,
Wow.
So they're working on like those groups versus we're working on like state and local.
Sure.
I did a demo the other day with my ASU, my alma mater.
Nice. That's cool.
So
hopefully they sign up, right?
Hopefully, but
yeah,
it takes a process.
I'm sure it's not a 20-minute sale.
but what I was going to say though is you see some of like the wins and the reasons, and we get win reports from around the world, because it's not just companies headquartered here; they're headquartered in Europe, Asia, etc. And you see the different reasons on how people can use data to improve the customer experience. And by doing that, it makes sense. You're either saving time and money internally, you're getting a better customer for the future, there's higher retention. There's a lot of positive revenue things. So it's not like groups are just doing it just to be nice to the citizens, although that's a nice byproduct.
Of course.
You know, it all comes down to how do you actually do it, but also increase the revenue and the
The
path
bottom line.
forward. Yeah. And the bigger the companies get, you have, it's like everywhere, right? You have all these solutions, and because you go through acquisition and different things happen. So there also becomes scenarios where how do you just consolidate that? Because we have 12 different logins, and we have, and that's not just like a sprinkler thing. That's a thing in a lot of different industries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little frustrating to
Yeah.
try and remember all this password login stuff. Yeah. So that's cool, man. I'm not sure if you want to keep going forever, but I think it's about time for that final pony story.
Oh, pony.
What do you think?
We still have a few more minutes.
Okay.
Let me, actually, I was gonna bring, let me text my wife here.
He's gonna get his wife to bring their cat
Hey,
from
Jen.
South Carolina. So
Can you bring Max in here, period?
this will be awesome. Like big fluffy cat, small short hair. Or...
Kind of like a stocky, mid-sized cat.
There you
He's
go.
probably gained a little weight.
Yeah, that's
So,
awesome.
But yeah, that was actually probably my favorite pony stories from that summer.
Cool. Was
Max,
that your 7th summer in South Carolina?
seventh
Cool.
summer.
Cool.
Max was actually, I found him at a trailer.
Okay.
And they had a whole litter, and Max was probably, he couldn't have been more than like a day old.
Okay.
I mean, he was like,
A little peanut.
and I brought him back, roommates, his like first food was like ham. So we just fed
Nice.
him like meat and
Human
cheese.
food,
And
yeah. So Max got big pretty quick.
he
Huh?
got big. And
Yeah.
we would bring him to the Sunday meeting. So he became like this team mascot.
That's awesome. I
Yeah,
love
yeah.
cats, man. They're misunderstood.
Well, and so when we first got him, we bring him into the house and we're like, wait a minute, what's the stuff jumping off of him?
Oh no.
Fleas and ticks.
Yeah.
And so we got him some shampoo, we got
Yeah.
the fleas and ticks off of them. And then there'd be some days where I would bring him on like ride-alongs,
Oh
and he would just like chill in my seat.
wow.
And it was funny because I would go in and I'd come back and he'd still be there.
Yeah,
So he'd have like the option to like leave,
but never would take it.
but never take it. And
That's cute.
of course, little cat, and he's crawling all over the seats. And
Yeah.
sometimes I'm driving, he's like coming up over the, you know, the shoulder.
You're like, ow, hey, your claws hurt, right?
So he even made it back to checkout. And then on the way back home from my last summer, my roommate that summer, one of them was Ivan Zofko, who lives here in Phoenix.
Cool.
And I banked at Chase. So I remember I got my check, and even though it was I didn't have much money in the bank account.
Sure,
Isn't that how it
sure.
always works?
Yeah,
You
right.
spend what you make. So I had Chase Bank. Well, there were no, at that time, there were no Chase banks in Tennessee. So the first one was in Oklahoma.
Okay.
And I remember Max, he's like, it's hot. We're driving across country. He's like, he's panting like a dog, which
Yeah.
I don't think
that's not a
cats are
good
supposed
sign.
to, they're not supposed to pant.
No, very hot.
So I stopped at this gas station, and I just wanted a cup of ice, and they wanted to charge me for it. Like, so I got a credit card out, but he's like, no, like you need a credit card. I was like, I don't have, I need to get to this Chase Bank.
Yeah.
And we go to the bank, and so I get this cup of ice. Ivan's rubbing Max with ice.
Oh my gosh.
And then we go into the Chase Bank, we deposit the summer check. And
Yeah.
then we're finally, Max finally is off to like glory.
Yeah.
you know,
Being normal and
Yeah.
not overheating.
Not overheating.
Jeez.
So, but that summer, so it's just kind of a funny story. I remember this might have been midway through. Are we allowed to say customer names? Is that?
I mean, that's, I don't think anyone's like, oh, I'm gonna look up this person, you know. I've said a few customer names. So.
I'll just say Sandy Road. This is in outside of Bethune, South Carolina. So we're out in the middle of nowhere. It's like sand country.
Yeah.
And they're not like dirt roads. It's just like sandy, you know, roads. And
Because you were right by the beach. Wilmington is on the beach, right?
I mean, you're it's sand country. So
Okay.
I mean, you're probably
I'm from the Midwest. Like Nebraska is triply landlocked. You have to go through at least 3 states.
you're
to
a
get-
couple hours.
Yeah.
But you're
Yeah.
but because there's
Oh, inland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so you're a couple hours just because there's no easy way to get to the beach. Like if you
Sure.
could like jump in your aircraft, you could probably get there very quickly.
Yeah.
So I remember going down this sandy road, and of course it's named after the family. And it's probably 8 o'clock. I pull up, and they're throwing this huge party. And off to the side of this trailer, they were building a 7,000 square foot home. but it was made out of trailers.
That's a lot of square feet. Go ahead.
But it was
trailers. That's right.
But it was like stacked modular homes.
Oh my God.
So it wasn't finished yet. And they're drinking beers. The kids are having a great time.
Yeah.
And I asked them, just be funny, right? You pull up, what seems to be the celebration? It's Tuesday night.
Yeah.
And he goes, oh, my wife, she's going to prison tomorrow. And I'm like, oh,
okay. So we're celebrating. Okay.
We are. How? Mind me ask how long? It's basically said it's easy time, like one year, 1 day, and
easy time.
Easy time. And it was for mortgage fraud.
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
And so I'm just like, okay, like, and the bookman in me is just like, we'll just ignore it, no big deal, right? Like, prison's gonna happen, just plow through to your presentation. So I sit down, little kids, so at that CD-ROMs and Ask Me Whys.
Yeah. So
I was showing the Ask Me Why books, and I'm probably midway through the presentation, and you hear a little rattle over in the corner.
Like a
rattlesnake.
Ooh.
And so this dad, I know his last, Barry was his name.
Yeah.
Barry says, I'll show you a real education, Aric. And he goes and he picks up the rattlesnake with his bare hands.
His berry hands, yeah.
Bare hands, there you go. And so he was actually showing, like, why it's venomous and what type of snake it is. And you're just like, oh my God. And the kids are just eating it up, right? And he was talking about how as a kid he'd been bit by like brown recluse spiders, and how it took like 3 years to heal. And so you're just like, oh my God, this guy's like,
this guy's hardcore.
Like, I'm not gonna
easy time to this guy, right?
So he ended up buying, gosh, he probably bought like $300 worth of stuff.
Yeah.
He wrote a check for half.
Yeah.
So that's just part one of the story.
Okay.
Now we get to delivery.
Yeah.
Right. And
wife's in prison.
Wife's not there. Right?
Yeah.
She's in prison. She stayed.
She stayed. Funny. That's so funny.
She stayed in prison for that 1 year, 1 day. And so I come back and I'm showing him the CD-ROMs. I'm showing him the books. And then he had a little pond in his, when I say little, it's a pretty good sized pond.
Yeah.
And you see something move. And they're just like, can't make this stuff up. There's a water snake, like a water moccasin.
Yeah.
So he
also poisonous?
I would assume so.
Right.
So he goes,
doesn't sound safe.
He goes, yeah, we can't have those water moccasins. So he goes and gets his pistol. And he's wading through the pond, like shooting, trying to get the water moccasin.
Yeah. Oh man.
And
a bit different from shooting fish in a barrel, right?
Exactly.
Moccasin in a pond, dang.
So he's shooting this water moccasin. I don't know if he ever got it. But,
yeah.
So then he asked me, like, where are you going next? And I was going to this gentleman, and I remember him because he was the only one that had this brand new H2 Hummer, like in the county. And he was I didn't sell to a lot of dads.
Sure. This is the moms.
But this was the dad that, like, kids, sit down. Mr. Aric has something to say to you.
Right.
You need to pay extreme attention.
Cool.
And he bought like, I think the full 7-book set at the time.
Wow.
And so I said to Barry, I was like, well, I'm actually going to, that guy's name was Paul.
Yeah.
And he goes, oh, I know Paul. Let me call him.
Yeah.
And he goes, Paul, did you send some skinny white guy over to my house? And I can't remember exactly how he phrased it with some salty language, but
right.
He's like, yeah, that skinny white guy came over to my house too. I think he's coming back. He's like, oh, I'll send him your way. And I won't forget Barry. So I was going to Paul's house, and Paul had actually moved from another country, but come to find out he was actually exiled from that country. And Paul was like one of the main guys in that county, had a great job, but committed some sort of crime that he was not welcome back.
Yeah.
And it just gets you thinking, like, I mean, these are, different people.
A little bit.
Good people. Like, I enjoyed the conversations, but you're just like, wow, like this is a different world down here.
Yeah.
And it was. And
some Joe Exotic, or like the Tiger King guy,
right?
right?
It's not far off, right?
Right.
So that was my the last memory ponytail story that I could think of.
Yeah.
A funny kind of first summer story
Sure.
that my wife used to tell was
Yeah.
she was so nervous knocking on her first door, and I think it was Sun Prairie, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
She waited for the family to leave, and then she went and knocked just to like get it out of the way.
Okay, I'm good. All right. Yeah.
But she also talks about like her first sit down she ever had, the person bought.
Oh, nice.
And so she felt like it was like the universe saying like, you like need this.
Yeah.
Because that actually kind of rocketed her just to have some confidence rolling out of sales school, because she definitely had never approached anything like that. Like she was good at memorizing, she was good at all the things of sales school, but they actually like
But
put
they
in practice.
I
Yeah.
had a first year like that. She was like, I hate bothering people. It's like, well, your job is to bother people and then make them like you. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
okay. You're likable, you know? That's funny. So did you get a response on your fancy watch there as to whether or not Jen can bring the cat?
Yeah, she may not be
That's
bringing the cat.
Jen requested not to be on the episode, but we could reel her in, maybe. I don't know. Do you want to see if you can go get Max yourself? I can read off our next few episodes and we can finish off with a feline friend.
Yeah, I'll go get him.
All right, cool. So this has been an awesome episode for anyone tuning in. You know, Aric's got a lot of great stories, and yeah, so it's cool to be able to. Oh man, I was logged into the Facebook Live on my phone here. Let's read off the upcoming episodes. So this Thursday, the 13th, it's going to be a panel with Andres and some of the folks he's been working with at Self-Publishing School. Again, I don't know who is involved on that. I think Chad Alio is going to be reappearing for his second episode, along with, I think, Maurice Howell and some other people that I don't know. Be sure to tune in this Thursday at 7:30 Central Time. Next Sunday, we've got Maddie Greger. We've got an open spot that next Thursday. But yeah, she's an awesome, fun, huge heart. She was top 3 or something like that her first summer some years ago. And I haven't talked with her since leaving the book business. I know that she's the kind of person who a lot of people love and gravitate to. So she'll have a fun episode next Sunday. After that, again, that Thursday, the 20th is open. Anyone willing to take it? We're looking for some guests. Sunday, the 23rd is going to be Dylan Buck, a legendary bookman, who finished up a few years ago and is working in Family Heritage. So
Got a last summer.
we got Max. Max, hello. This is the chill cat.
No front claws.
No front claws. Yeah, finally, right?
Yeah, there's the
Hi, Max.
born in 2010.
Yep, in the
Yeah.
great state of South Carolina, in the sand country. So yeah, Max is cool to be held. You want to sit, Max? I know you can't be seen on camera. Max has some weight to him.
Yeah, doesn't mind eating.
Well, thanks for joining, Max, and all of the audience. Do you have any final words you'd like to share, Aric? It's been a pleasure to get to know you.
No, thanks for coming by. And originally I thought it was going to be via Zoom, and then
Here we
heard
are.
Nick was around the corner, so it's
Oh, yeah.
perfect. Perfect timing. No, other than that, happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there, and thanks again for having me today.
Yeah, and here's a sign off from a cat. First feline guest. All right, thanks everyone. We'll see you this Thursday. Andres will be running that episode, and be sure to tune in. Bye.